Well, good morning.
Good morning. Good morning.
With the daffodils and the crocuses and the strove and the bloom yet, I thought I'd wear my tie with the flowers on this morning in the spring. Go from there. But they're slowly growing. That's for sure. Can't wait to see. What a mighty God we serve. Is the chorus this morning. 321 is the number. 321.
Chapter 23, Acts. Sometimes I read these books, they'll say, not that I'm going to do it, I would assume you could develop a computer program that does that. But we'll do this, and I've done this pretty consistently when we do this verse by verse thing. The 23rd chapter of Acts, it contains, we begin this way, 35 verses. Father, bless our lesson and preaching today and prayers and all that's going to happen today. Lord, for your hand to be in it. And now, Lord, that you would intervene wherever you need to. In Christ's name, amen. You know, where we say 35 verses, so many words, so many letters, and there are guys that do that, like, and I may have written down some of this stuff in my Bible someplace. Usually, I would write it. Where would you write it down in your Bible? In the margin. You could do it at the heading of Acts 23. But let's say you did the whole Bible, and I don't have it here. Yeah, there's pages in the back, pages in the front, pages in between Old and New Testament, and I don't have that. You know, I would put in kind of points of interest. How many words are in the Bible? How many letters are in the Bible? Anybody know how many words are in the Bible? You would guess. A lot. Did somebody say a lot?
11,000?
I would have to, in the Bible.
I think there's just under 1 million words.
It's like 1 million.
11,000 verses?
Oh, yeah, you know what, but even if you develop a program like that, you know, we say King James, and can the computer make a mistake, or can we count it different ways?
I already have it. You can download a free, it's called a Pure Bible Search software that is very reliable.
Okay.
And it's free. And we're smuggling Bibles into places where they cannot have a Bible.
Now, if somebody
electronically.
So if somebody actually did this, though, before you had that, man, it's a lot of counting. Now, you couldn't count letters because the different spellings, you know, there's between the 1611 and now, spellings are different.
That's no
How
problem.
spell sin in the 1611? Yeah, right, but spell it. No, it's a, well, I'm not talking about the integration sign, but spell it in the King James Bible, 1611. It's not spelled S-I-N.
S-I-N-N?
I believe it would be S-I-N-N-E.
I was gonna say E.
Now, you could prove me wrong, go back there and say, see, in that 1630, it isn't that.
We got it right over here.
But I know, but if we were to guess, it's S-I-N-N-E. And that's just the way it is. So if you actually do letters, you can't do that because of all the additions.
So mathematics would be 7 cosine?
Oh, I don't know. But it,
Yeah, I learned to sit in math class.
if you ask me electronically to figure all that out and to do that in a lab, I can't do that. I never could get that. Now, in trig I could get it, but in a lab and electronically, I can't figure out those phases. Anyway, Acts 23 contains 35 verses. Obviously, there are no paragraphs marking, so we have our outline. You have several different outlines. So this is the way we outlined it. I have all C words. Paul, earnestly beholding the council, said, Men and brethren, I have lived in all good conscience before God unto this day. So all C words, I have like 4 points just in the first verse. The confrontation, he earnestly he's beholding the council. So the confrontation, there is, and there are times when there are confrontations. So this is a confrontation. He's really looking forward to it. The councils are our second point. He is now going to plead his case. He begins to plead his case. In knowing the Bible, familiar with it, do they give him opportunity to plead his case? What's your guess? Do they really give him a good opportunity to plead his case?
No.
They really don't. And what do? They kept it. Don't you hate that? Don't you? You just hate that. Now, in this particular case, if we're preaching, that's one thing. But if you're in a discussion and you open your mouth, 3 words come out of your mouth, someone's correcting you already. You're trying to make their case without even hearing your case. And that's very frustrating. So you have the confrontation, the counsel, the case. He's going to build his case, which he really doesn't have time to develop this. And then, and he talks about, there's another, in all good conscience, he speaks of his conscience. Now, when we outline it like this, you might say, well, it's over outlined, which it is. And we could find topics that are maybe cut the outline in half. But we could talk about these things, about the counsel, the conscience, and teach as a doctrinal things about those. Verse 2 through 5, the command. And the high priest Ananias commanded. So there is a command that is given. In verse 6, he is perceived. So the cleverness of Paul. He now sees how to pit one group against another, the Pharisees against the Sadducees. So the cleverness. Verse 10, and when there arose a great dissension, the chief captain, fearing lest Paul should have been pulled in pieces. So the care that was given Paul. And, we could say, well, the chief captain, probably the Holy Spirit put in his mind, you better get down there and save him. And God will use men to accomplish his goals. So the care that is given. I remember we used to play this game, and we were seniors in high school, and there would be a line drawn. There's a line drawn, and you got half of the gym class on one side, and half the guys are on that side, and half the guys are on this side. There's no ball involved. Anybody know what the game is? There could be three lines, a middle line, and then 2 other lines. Anybody know what the game is? You got half the guys are over there and half the guys are over here. There's no ball. You're not throwing anything. Anybody know what the game is? The game is to capture the guys on this side and drag them onto your side and get everybody. I don't know what it was called, but we played it, and The gym teacher probably thought it up or saw it someplace. Probably it's against the law to do it today, who knows? So we were pulling each other from one side to the other, and you had to, whoever got everybody pulled over onto their side was the winner.
Individually?
You pull them over individually or by groups?
Man to man?
Well, it could be man to man. The idea is you reach over and you grab somebody, and then you gang up and you try to get that guy over.
2-on-2?
Well, what happened? It could be 20 on one. Anyway, what happened is they grabbed me, and my arms went one way, and my team grabbed me by my legs. So it was like this, fearing that they should have been pulled, that Paul would have been pulled in pieces. You could be pulled apart like this. Well, I was up in the air. The gym teacher was just having a heyday, you know. They got to lighten up their day and make things fun. And so I was getting pulled to pieces. I forget what happened. I think we finally lost, and I got pulled onto the other side. But they had my legs, and the other side had my arms, and I'm pulling for all I'm worth, and so it wouldn't matter if I was pulling at all. Anyway, it was like a tug of war, but I was the rope.
You were a piece of taffy.
I was a piece of taffy. It was a taffy pull. But you could see where that would happen. When you say pulled in pieces in verse 10, then they were, I would say, not emotionally or spiritually, but physically, literally pulling him. And could have pulled him in pieces. Anyway, the care. Verse 11, and the night following, the Lord stood by him. So there is the comfort. The Lord is comforting him through here. Then in verse 12 through verse 15, when it was day, certain of the Jews band together. And so when they band together, they are making what? Give me a C word for that.
Conspiracy?
The conspiracy. Yeah, what did you say? Oh, a confederacy. Yeah, that's the same thing.
Confederacy.
A confederacy, well, I put the conspiracy. But confederacy is just as good. All right, verse 16. And when Paul's sister's son heard of their lying in wait, Paul's sister's son. So it's Paul's nephew. So there was the concern. I think I brought this up. How do they learn of the conspiracy? How do they learn of the conspiracy in Robert Louis Stevenson's Treasure Island? How is the hand tip of the conspiracy that the pirates are going to take over, but they find out? How do they find that out? Anybody remember? Hawkins. Is it Hawkins? What's his first name? Jim Hawkins. He wants an apple. So he goes to the apple barrel. He either falls in or he's reaching in. He can't reach the apple, so he jumps in. He climbs in. So these barrels are big, you know. And he's eating the apple, and then he overhears isn't that like that? Or if they said it openly before that, somebody unwittingly, not knowing that this is Paul's nephew.
I'm going to have to read that.
Either they didn't know it, or they're so dumb they didn't catch themselves in saying it, or he was within earshot and they didn't know it. So you have the concern of the nephew. And then in verses 17 through 21, you can see this outline as it develops. The confiding. The nephew then takes it to the Paul, and then from Paul to the centurion. So the confiding is done. Verse 22. So the chief captain then let the young man depart and charge. There's our next word, the charge. He gives a charge, and we're going to protect Paul here and get him delivered. And then verse 23 through 32, almost through the balance here, is the conducting of him. Getting him from one place to the other. I mean, they get 2 centurions, so that you got 200 foot soldiers, and you have these horsemen too. I mean, that's quite a gathering of support here, of protection. So the conducting. And then verse 33 through 35, who when they came to Caesarea and delivered the epistle to the governor, presented Paul also before him. Okay, I guess I went off of verse 35. He commanded him to be kept in Herodian's judgment hall. So the constraint, he is constrained there. He's like, doesn't say he's locked up. It's like a house arrest. Paul's not taken off, but he may not have the opportunity to take off. Now, how he's guarded, that's not given. But he's in the judgment hall. Is he in a room that's locked? It doesn't disclose that. Somebody may say, well, it is this way or that, but he's constrained, the constraint. So that's our outline. So let's just, and we're going to stick to the outline as we go along, but that doesn't mean we're not going to use and just go verse by verse and look at all these words. All right, verse 1, earnestly. Now, I looked it up, earnest. I looked up in the dictionary. This earnestly, he's looking, I would have to say he's looking forward to defending himself. What does he hope to do in defending himself? He could have more than one motive. Preaching the gospel. Now that may not be first and foremost in our mind, but it might be first and foremost in his mind.
It's hard as it is to see it, the king. It would probably take you a long time before you lose your head. Probably take a while before you lose your head.
Well, what's one way to easily? What's an easy way to see the judge and witness to the judge?
Plead guilty.
Throw a brick through the bay window of a storefront, and you'll see the judge.
But he wants to see the Supreme Court judge.
Oh, I understand. He's looking forward to defending himself. So he's earnestly beholding the counsel. He's looking forward to this. So his motive could be multiple. He could be, and I didn't write these things down, it could be he wants to be able to give the gospel. He wants to be free. He wants out of here. Justifying himself so he can go back out as a missionary. You know, it could be for multiple reasons. Earnest means determined, eager, zealous. And aren't these Jews tend to be zealous? With deep sincerity and feeling, and he's serious. That's what earnest means. So with that word there, in looking up the actual definition, he's looking forward to this. If you were in court, are you looking forward to that, or are you looking forward to being in court? Anybody here looking forward to being in court other than a lawyer? Man, this is what I say about lawyers. Man, if you need a lawyer, you need to get a lawyer. They are trained mouths. They know what to say. But I say that a lawyer is kind of like the law. A lawyer works both sides of the street. He's either trying to get a noose around your neck, if you're depending on what side of the law you're on, or he's trying to get a noose off your neck. Either way, he wins. Right? He gets paid. Either way, he wins. All right, now this next one. So we went from being earnest to the counsel. Where does the counsel come from? What is it made up of? What do we assume? How many do we assume are on the council?
72? 70?
The 70. We assume the 70 are there. So then where does this come from if we were to go Old Testament? And we're gonna do what we've already learned this. Folks, we've already learned this. So we know this, but where do we come up with the 70 in the Old Testament? Moses, and what did they do? And the 70 elders, and what did they do? Oh, he had to come up with 70 elders to help him. And then what did they do with these 70 elders? They specifically did something on a mountain. Anybody remember? Sorry if you don't remember. They had dinner with the Lord.
All of them?
I'm pretty sure.
I don't remember that story.
All right, let's go to Numbers 11. Remember, whenever Israel is in trouble, where do you go? Numbers. Not exclusively, but for the most part. Numbers 11. Numbers 11, verse 16. Now, wait a minute. And that isn't what I had there. It's what you had said. And the Lord said unto Moses, Gather unto me 70 men of the elders of Israel, whom thou knowest to be the elders of the people, and officers over them, and bring them unto the tabernacle of the congregation, that they may stand there with me. They were to relieve Moses of this burden of judging. But no, I thought it was, there's another place where they eat with them.
18.
Is it 18? No, it's another place. I need to find that. I thought I had included that, but if I didn't, I didn't. All right, another one. The Numbers is to help Moses. Moses is a type of Christ. How many did they send out to witness? How many did Jesus send out?
70?
70. Luke 10, verse 1. He sends them out 70, and that by twos. So whatever's going on in the Old Testament is also going on. You can apply it. And when you start thinking like that, it's almost wherever you go, you'll be able to do that. So the other is Luke 10, verse 1. So you got Numbers 11, 16. Boy, I need to find that. Where they are up on the mountain and they eat together. And so if they eat with the Lord, who are they eating with?
Pre-incarnate Christ.
They're eating with literally, physically, Jesus Christ. All right? It's like the Lord buried Moses. Well, then, who buried Moses? A person can say, well, God can do whatever he wants. That's true, man. God can do whatever he wants. Well, the assumption then is physically Jesus is there and he actually does the digging and so on. All right.
Can I say something?
No, that's okay. Matthew 10.
You'd like it.
Yeah, I would.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Matthew 10.
The Father sets the plan, the Son executes the plan, and the Holy Spirit, I forget what he does.
Yeah, you know what? This is like an outline that you have. And I'll tell you, there's a lot of good outlines out there. Now, and you gather them up wherever you can, you know. Matthew 10, verse 17, such as when the gifts of the Holy Spirit are given. If you go there in 1 Corinthians 12, you have the Holy Spirit, the Son, and the Father, all in the administrating and the giving of these gifts. Anyway, Matthew 10, verse 17. Always remember, you cannot separate the Trinity. But beware of men, for they will deliver you up to the councils, and they will scourge you in their synagogues. So a council is not, it's not in a good meant in a good way. They're dedicated to destroying the truth in the name of religion. That's what they're dedicated to do. They don't want to hear that. What do they do with their ears when they hear that kind of stuff?
Stop them.
They stop their ears. They cover their ears. Acts 4. Acts chapter 4, we'll look at this. The council, there's 4 specific places. Now, Acts 23, we're not going to go there. We're already there. That's one of the 4. But if you go to Acts 4, 5 through 21, and it came to pass on the morrow that their rulers and the elders and scribes, Ananias the high priest, and Caiaphas and John and Alexander, as many as were the kindred of the high priest, were gathered together at Jerusalem. All right, and when they had set them in the midst, this is the first confrontation. Acts chapter 5, verse 21. Acts 5, verse 21. And when they heard that, they entered into the temple early in the morning and taught. But the high priest came, and they that were with him, and called the council together. Here's the second place. Acts 6. Acts 6. And they stirred up the people. Verse 12. And they stirred up the people and the elders and the scribes, and came upon him and caught him and brought him to the council. Or brought him to the council. I mean, this Christianity is just stomping all over what they believe and what they want you to believe. And it's kind of like what's taking place in our country is what you and I have been taught as children, you know, the way we were educated, is the founding fathers, were they good or were they bad?
Depends on your perspective.
Well, as you and I were taught. Are they good? I mean,
Good.
did
Good-
you ever
good
hear of
men,
George
good
Washington being bad?
They were all outstanding people.
Or Abraham Lincoln?
You know, they were all, you know, absolutely perfect in every way.
Well, I wouldn't say we were taught that they were perfect in every way, but they didn't bring up anything negative
Right.
that I could recall. But then again, I was looking out the window, hoping the
All
bell would ring.
races, they were all slave owners.
They were all Masons. They were all slave owners. Name off some other negative thing. Oh, and now it's the Constitution. The latest is the Constitution was written by a bunch of old white men for their advantage to suppress black people. I don't know, man. It's gone overboard. Is what they're teaching young people is they want to destroy everything that we have been taught. It's kind of like, well, I'm kind of glad we're seeing the sunset here. I don't know what younger people are going to do with this stuff. All right, so the 70, and they do eat with them, and the Lord eats with them on the mountain. And boy, I wish I had. I'll see if I can incorporate this here next week. All right, the case. Paul is going to make his case. The case. So back here to Acts 23. Paul makes his case, but it is his shortest case he is going to make. Before he gets off the ground here, he opens his mouth. Like I said, he says 3 or 4 words, man, it's just cut off right away. So he's not permitted to speak, and that's why it's his shortest case he's making, because he's just continually interrupted. He spoke in verse 1, in verse 3, verse 5, and verse 6. Verse 1, I have lived in all good conscience before God until this day. And then what happens? Man, he gets cracked. Does it sound like he said anything wrong? Boom, he gets it. In verse 3, and then said Paul unto him, God shall smite thee, thou wicked one. I mean, he's sure sounds angry. And they say, Revilest thou God's high priest? They interrupt him again in verse 5. Then Paul said, I wist not, brethren, that he was the high priest. For it is written, thou shalt not speak evil of the ruler of thy people. First of all, should they have hit him?
No.
Because he says, judge me after you're judging me after the law, yet you're doing something that's contrary to the law?
Imagine that.
Imagine that, yes.
I think maybe he may have spoken out of turn. That Ananias was there and he was supposed to be in charge of the council, and Paul spoke out of turn.
Yeah, Paul's not invited to speak.
Yeah.
They don't say, Paul, let's hear from you. That's true.
And Ananias sort of.
Now, that's an assumption. It's not stated, but who knows? That could be part of it. But he's making his case. He gets cracked. He says, you're doing this, you want me to be judged according to the law, but you're doing this contrary to the law.
You found your verse.
Say that again?
You found your verse.
I don't know what you...
Numbers 11:16.
11:16.
Gather.
No, that's where we
The Lord said to
were.
Moses, gather 70 men of the elders of Israel. Go up to the tabernacle of the congregation.
No, that's not the verse.
That's a different one?
No, that's the one we went to. Yeah, go ahead and scroll for that. It's where they ate with the Lord.
And then how about 24, 11:24?
What? Give me another one. They ate with the Lord.
I'm just looking at reference.
Go ahead. You take a look for that. And then
Is
verse...
they with the Lord, is that the phrase?
Yeah, it could be.
Are those the words?
I don't know. I'm pretty sure that's really close. They ate with the Lord. They ate with him up on the mountain there. They ate with him. I'm pretty sure. Verse 6, but when Paul perceived the one part, now this is where he's being clever. We'll get to that later. But he says, I am a Pharisee, the son of a Pharisee. Of the hope and resurrection of the dead, I am called in question. By the way, when he says that, the hope and resurrection of the dead, I am called in question. Is that why he was called in question? No.
He was preaching.
No, they captured him because he was in the temple, supposedly with Gentiles, which he wasn't, and he was doing this vow, and they said he's preaching against, contrary to the law. It wasn't the hope of the resurrection. So Paul's telling a big lie. He's just making this up on the fly. But you might find another verse to justify that, but technically they claimed he was going against the law of Moses. But those are his 4 places where he is permitted to speak. And the topic is just changing, flying like crazy. He's trying to get there. And by the way, in verse 5, where he says, and also in verse 6, I am a Pharisee, the son of a Pharisee. He's making connections. He's making connection with half the group, alienating the other half, but making.
That's what he did. He created dissension.
He created dissension. All right. So the conscience. It's the first. Let's go back now to verse 1. The conscience. It's the first word out of Paul's mouth because it really had a large place in Paul's life. So if we were to go back to these verses, let's go to Romans 9:1. Romans 9:1. If you have a good conscience, what do you get? What's the end result of that? If you have a good conscience, you get a good what? A good night's sleep. If you have a bad conscience, you get a bad night's sleep. Now, if you've done wrong 30 years ago, the longer it's in the past, hopefully it gets dimmer. So it vanishes. It goes away. But I say the truth, Romans 9:1, I lie not, my conscience also bearing me witness in the Holy Ghost. So his conscience played a big part. 1 Timothy 1, verse 5. He talks about a good conscience. Now the end of the commandment is charity out of a pure heart and of a good conscience and of faith unfeigned. A good conscience. Acts 24, verse 16. Acts 24, verse 16. And herein do I exercise myself to have always a conscience void of offense toward God and toward men. So I've given this illustration here of what the county does. Folks, these people on the left have an agenda. They believe their agenda. They believe it. They are convinced of it. We were given a box. The wife and I were given a shoe box. We had this box. Everybody was given them. This is an exercise. Then in the exercise you were given, we'll say, 10 black marbles and 10 white marbles. Okay. All right. Is your dentist white or is he black? Don't ask me what this thing was supposed to. This was for fostering. This was a class for fostering, to become a foster parent.
Oh,
Is your dentist white or is he black? It's white. So we put whoever it was, you put that in the shoebox. I put the white marble in there. Is your accountant white or black? I mean, they just went right down where you buy gas. I mean, it just, your doctor, is he white or black? Your veterinarian, we didn't have.
I don't know, I'm blind, I can't see.
Now, if you were a black person there, and at least 2/3 of the group were black, let's say, would they be going to a white dentist or a black dentist? I don't know, and I really don't care. But let's say they went to a black dentist. Well, they put a black ball in.
kind for kind.
Yeah, kind for kind, and we were doing this. And halfway through this thing, I said, this is an exercise to make us feel guilty. And I said, I don't feel the least bit guilty. None of this went against my conscience. I don't feel guilty. That was my dentist 20 years ago. It's my dentist today. Same accountant I've had for 20 years. And but people, man, there's an agenda out there to make you feel really guilty. I don't feel the least bit guilty. I don't feel guilty at all.
You should feel guilty for not feeling guilty.
Feel guilty for not feeling guilty. But this stuff must be drummed into these kids' heads. I remember we had a guy going to church here. How do you feel about Malcolm X? Good, bad, or I could care less one way or the other. How was he killed?
By his own men.
He was killed by his own. I didn't even know that. I didn't follow it.
He must have straight up.
This is an exercise at, what's the worst high school in Cleveland? South High. And what's the name of the former one that's the junior high? The kids went there.
Boys Industrial.
No. Can't think of the name.
Hart.
Pardon?
Maybe Hart.
A.B. Hart. I think that's it. A.B. Hart's the worst. It was the worst high school. It now becomes the junior high. South High's the worst. This is actually an exercise. They actually pump this with the kids. They have to watch the Malcolm X movie, and this stuff is just pumped at these kids.
Maybe they ought to watch The Principal with John.
I don't know, when I sat in grade school and you saw the film strip, the principal ran it, and this is Rome. And you'd see the pictures, You weren't getting pumped as to how bad, well, we all know Mussolini was bad, I don't know, it's wild. It's wild what's going on there.
Well, he was good for Fiat Motors.
Conscious. This is a good saying. It takes but a moment to say. Notice he says it in a moment. Acts 23. He opens up. I have lived in all good conscience. It takes but a moment to say, but it takes a lifetime to live. A moment to say, but a lifetime to live. All right? It is the conscience. We used to do lessons on this on the board and make these drawings of circles. a circle of the mind or the heart, and then, or a man, and different layers of how God wants to get in, how he gets in and making the change and all. It takes but a moment. You can find charts like that in doctrinal books. The inner part of a man that discerns responsibility in reference to moral truth. When was man's conscience really pricked?
Garden of Eden.
Garden of Eden. When they became conscious of this good and evil. And then where is that moral seat then in Romans chapter 2? It already shows that the commandment is there.
Written in their hearts.
It's written in their hearts. It's already written in their hearts. It is what actually keeps mankind from going berserk. Keeps mankind from going berserk. You'll have these verses next week. The question is this: is your conscience really a reliable guide? Is it? The heart is what? That's where your conscience, you say that's where it is, the seat is. The heart is what? Jeremiah 17. Is deceitful above all things and desperately wicked, man. So is it really a reliable guide? Yes, for it senses good and evil, right and wrong. Yet no, in the sense that continual sinning, willful disobedience, it harms the conscience. And we'll look at this next week. It can be defiled, it can be seared, and it can be deceived. Right? We have a whole generation coming up that is continually being shaped by these teachers to say the most absurd and ridiculous things. And they think they're as right as rain. Now that's what's coming up. What do they say? If you're 20 and you have no, if you're 20 and
you have no brain.
No, if you're 20 and you have no no, that's not the same. If you're 20 and you have
no compassion, you have no heart.
If you have no compassion, you have no head. If you're 50 and you have, I can't remember how it goes. If you're 50 and I think Mark Twain said that. I think it goes back a ways. If you're 50 and you have you have no brains. Yeah. but it's so true, Anyway, we'll stop there. We'll preach here in 15 minutes. There we go.